in addition to camera footage, we can kind of piece together what happened. And here you see here we have two adults in addition to these students. They witnessed the incident. One of my roles when I served as principal was that of a detective, and I quite enjoyed that oftentimes because it was like putting together a puzzle when you're missing pieces, and it was very satisfying once I was able to get to the bottom of things, and then also get into the head of a student who was obviously lying to me in order to find my way to the truth. So I enjoyed that part of my job sometimes. And then there were those times where I thought, oh my gosh, is this what you're arguing about? Is this what the deal is? This is very petty. Please let me do the other parts of my job that I really want to, and I really need to get back to doing. So this story with this young man, Karmelo Anthony, who was responsible for, is being accused of stabbing another student tragically at this track meet. This story has been dominating the news, and with these things, the legal process, there has to be an appropriate amount of time to gather all the facts, do the due diligence to make sure that Karmelo gets a fair shot, he gets a fair trial, and that is appropriate. That is the system that we have, and I'm not going to get into all of the. I'm not going to get into a ton of speculation here. Really, what I want to look at is I want to look at the facts of this case, and then I want to look at it from the perspective of the school and the school's involvement here. And then, perhaps I'll share some of my thoughts coming from a former principal. But I want to keep this really measured because there's a ton of things that I don't know about this case, and I know that definitely there are people on both sides who are upset. It has gotten ugly, but yeah, and sadly we're talking about the loss of life. A young man has lost his life, and that's just tragic when you think about not only the young man losing his life, the parents who were having to bury a child, the other witnesses who were there, the brother of the young man who was killed, the twin, your twin brother dying in your arms, and then Karmelo. However it turns out, whatever the jury decides, his life is also changed forever as well. Okay, so we set that up. I just want to look at the facts here. Here we have the arrest report. Okay, we have the arrest report. Charge here, first degree felony. That's very, very serious. Very serious. So let's look at the information that they gathered in order to determine that charge. All right. At 10:01, Staley School Resource Officer E. Cortez heard over the radio dispatch call out a stabbing call at David Koya Kendall Stadium. FPD call notes indicate that an athlete was stabbed. The suspect was reported as being a black male wearing a gray hoodie and blue sweatpants. I immediately left my office and ran across the Staley Middle School parking lot towards the southwest entrance into the stadium. As I entered the stadium, two high school-age students informed me that the victim was on the north end of the stadium by the bleachers under Memorial High School tent. Did not identify these students. Next, I proceeded toward the north end of the stadium visitor side on foot. As I got closer to the north end, I could see the Memorial High School tent with multiple individuals under the tent. I feel the need to stop right there. I know from experience in supervising these meets that you have there's a lot of bodies just moving. So I think that that's important. That's important to talk about. Multiple individuals under the tent. I think it was a lot of students under that tent, because that's the way they have it set up. The different track teams, they'll huddle under their tent, especially if it's hot outside. They'll just huddle under their tent to protect themselves from the sun as they're waiting for the next event. All right, once I arrived onto the north side bleachers, an adult male who was on the track pointed out the suspect. I was not able to identify that witness. Now, I think all of that, most schools, they do have cameras on the field as well. And they have cameras pointing to their track, their football field. The way I'm assuming that's the way it's set up. You got the field in the middle, track on the outside. Most schools have cameras pointing in that direction simply because you have public events like this, and there are times where you may have to do an investigation. All right. The individual that was pointed out to me was a black male wearing a gray hooded sweater and dark colored Nike pants. The suspect at this point was on the track on the north end. There was a chain link fence that separated me from the suspect. I gave the suspect instructions to keep his hands up in the air. During this time, the suspect said verbally out loud, "I was protecting myself." It should be noted that I had not questioned him about the incident when he made that comment. So he's pointing out weren't given Miranda rights at that point. So that'll be interesting. That's an interesting legal question there. Is that admissible? I don't know. I asked him if he had any weapons, and he said no. I patted him down for weapons while we were walking along the fence, and I did not locate any on his person. I instructed the male to continue walking along the fence, which he complied, towards an area where there was an opening in the fence that led off the track. While walking him off the track, the suspect also said he put his hands on me. I then detained the suspect in handcuffed behind the back, and had him sit down on the ground. Officer A. Ricci had arrived on the scene at that time. I conducted another pat down of this person and then searched his person after he gave me consent. No weapons were located. While the suspect sat on the ground, I advised that I had the alleged suspect. The suspect then responds and says, "I'm not alleged. I did it." That's important. These are facts, ladies and gentlemen. Next, Officer Ricci and I walked the suspect to Patrol Vehicle 2412, which was on the northeast gate of Coyer Kendall Stadium. As we were walking to the squad car, the suspect was emotional and said, "He put his hands on me. I told him not to." I did not question the suspect about the incident while he was escorted to the patrol vehicle. I searched his person once again, and I had him sit in the backseat area, driver's side of the patrol vehicle. While the suspect was in the back seat, I noticed fresh blood on his left middle finger. Verbally acknowledged that I saw blood out loud so that it would be captured on my body-worn camera. It should also be noted that the suspect asked me, "Is he going to be okay?" while he was in the back seat. I then identified the suspect. He provided his name and date of birth verbally as Karmelo Anthony, black male with a date of birth of, I believe it's public. We know that he's 17 years old. Ran through dispatch. Officer J. Hancock arrived on the scene and remained with me and the suspect at this point. Karmelo was then checked via eSchool database for FISD students to also confirm his identity. The identifying information he provided matched the individual I had in custody. Next, I was advised to transport the subject to Frisco PD jail. Officer Hancock and I transported him to jail. Again, I did not question Karmelo about the incident. Upon arriving at the Frisco jail, Karmelo was escorted to the intake area. FPD jail staff changed him out into jail attire. I remained with the jail staff the entire time that he was changed over. The clothes that Karmelo was wearing was placed in an FPD paper evidence bag. The clothes remained in my possession from this point on. Upon Karmelo being placed into a jail cell, I continued to keep possession of his clothes. I returned to my patrol 2412 along with Officer Hancock, which was in the FPD Sally Port, and placed Karmelo's clothes in the back trunk area. So they're chain of custody with the evidence, with his clothes. I drove my patrol vehicle 2412 out to the Sally Port, parked the squad car in the FPD patrol parking area. Karmelo's clothes remained in the trunk of 2412. FPD crime scene technician K. Dillard then took possession of Karmelo's clothes. I added my body-worn camera to the case. I have no further information to report. So there you have the information, the report from the person who first encountered Karmelo Anthony once he got a call of the stabbing. I imagine this is the it says right there. I just read it. This is the SRO. So this officer was already on the campus, and he was able to confirm the student's identity because he as a SRO, he had access to the student information system, so he was able to do that. They use eSchool down there. So these are the facts that we have, and this officer was able to get it on camera, and he heard as well Karmelo's statement shortly after the incident. Okay, so I think that is really important. Now, I is just going through this again. These are all here. We have information from other officers, but I think that information from that officer, that is most important. So there is an officer here who followed up with the witnesses, which is very important. I believe it's this one right here. Let's go and check this out. We have another school resource officer. He heard on the radio that a student had been stabbed. It says, I immediately responded to the scene. Upon arrival, I first made contact with Officer Cortez, who was standing next to a marked police vehicle. Officer Cortez advised he had detained the suspect and he was in the patrol vehicle. I then responded to the victim's scene that was in the north bleachers. As I walked up, I noticed Frisco Fire Department personnel was attempting to provide life-saving measures to a subject later identified as a Memorial High School student. As other officers worked the scene, I was asked to respond to the stadium's medical locker room area and keep the following witnesses separated until detectives could speak with them. So we have the names of 3 students who were, they were separated. Yes, and that's what we did largely when we were doing an investigation, and we talked to them, and so that's what was done. While with them, I was told to take their cell phones from them and later turn them over to Sergeant Bissonette after being relieved. I was asked to make contact with all athletes that had been placed on school buses. Below is a list of students who identified themselves as witnesses to the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. That's the name of the young man who sadly lost his life. So here is and this is important too, right here. Here you have a list. This is a large list of witnesses right here. Large list of witnesses right here. And as I just kind of looking here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 schools, 6 schools represented here at this track meet, and and then, like I said, like there's just so much going on. There's students all over the place. There's bodies walking all around the track area, and so yeah, I can kind of see that there's a lot of witnesses, and so here you see not only a list of students, but these are students who are identifying themselves as witnesses of the stabbing. And so there, and again, this is just a little bit of just my history in working, just not as a police officer, but just doing investigations as a principal. Yes, we would. There be times where I would have to print out a list of names in an entire class, and I would have to go through and talk to all those students who were in that classroom because they're witnesses. And there you see, I'm going into just my experience as a principal, is the phones. They confiscated their phones. While with them, I was told to take their cell phones, because it's just a lot of students' reactions when they see a verbal altercation, because that's initially how these things start. They start as verbal altercations, and in a lot of instances, they just remain. This is a verbal altercation, and that's it. Now, sometimes verbal altercations do devolve into a fight, and in this situation, it devolved into the loss of life, which is just so tragic. So, we started at the top of this report. They're saying charge first murder in the first degree, and they've done their due diligence. They've talked to all of these students. They've got video from the school, and all that put together, that is what they're using to justify the murder in the first degree. This is it's just so sad. So Karmelo Anthony, he has said that I was that they put their hands on me. I was protecting myself, and again, like he has a right to a fair trial. And with these things, when I did these investigations, especially ones that involve like physical altercations, there were times when just no one is happy. No one is happy, because you have two students who they end up fighting on campus. Now, this isn't a fight, but this is just different. But they end up fighting on campus, and sometimes a fight is just a fight. But then there are those times when you have families say, "Hey, this person has been bullying my child, and you as a school are doing nothing about it." And then you have the other side. "Hey, that kid is bullying my kid. And then they got into a fight, and the school's doing nothing about it. We told you that you needed to do something about it, but you've done nothing. And so now what is my kid supposed to do?" So those situations, they happen quite often, and it is just it's so difficult. It's so difficult being a representative of the school, being a principal there, because it's very difficult, because we have our policies and procedures, and we're supposed to look at situations through that lens, and that just makes it it can make it very difficult at times. And so we know that Karmelo Anthony's family, they're saying that no, in fact, he is the victim. And it's like, if you weren't there, you don't know what the situation is if you weren't there. But it looks like, and at the very least, what you want is you want a thorough investigation. And I'm just saying that from a school's perspective, but because this ultimately ended up with someone being killed, it's out of the hands of the school. But I just hope and pray a thorough investigation is going to be done here, and with this large list of witnesses, in addition to camera footage, we can kind of piece together what happened. And here we have two adults. In addition to these students, they witnessed the incident. And that's, again, like this situation is very hot right now. There are people who are very passionate about this, and they're looking at the racial element. Karmelo Anthony is black, and the young man who lost his life is white. And again, Austin Metcalf is his name. I want to be respectful and say his name. I don't know what happened, but there are quite a few people who do know what happened and can ultimately help investigators get a picture of what happened, so that they can submit an appropriate charge to the prosecuting attorney, which they have did, and based off of their review of the evidence. Now, there's a lot of facts that are missing from this, only things that I've kind of overheard. But I wanted to just go off of this police report and see what we can gather from that, because these are the facts. Now, the audio, the things that were said under the tent, I don't believe are listed in this. I've gone through it, but what I can say is they've done their due diligence, because they've got, I think it looks like these are your primary witnesses. And I can imagine that someone had their cell phone video of this altercation. So, and it's just very, very difficult. This is what I've learned too. It's just very difficult to play the waiting game. But this is the way this system is set up, because there needs to be, Carmelo's, his legal team, they need time to go through the evidence so that they can properly defend him. And so that just stuff takes time, while at the same time, you see a lot is being said, a lot is being speculated about this case, and people act like they know, but they don't really know. But I know who knows. These people, when you put all of their observations together, then we can make a solid conclusion based off of these facts, because that's quite a few people there. And again, even with all these witnesses, I've had investigations, and I felt good about the conclusion that we drew. But not everyone is going to be happy, even still. But here, and I just track this. But you've got two coaches, and again, that's and the witness the incident. So I heard these two adults, they heard the suspect confess, heard Carmelo confess. and these two witnessed the incident. Now, I don't know. It's just like I'm just like I wonder how much of the incident did they witness, because I imagine, and again, this is me imagining, I don't know. Like a verbal altercation, that takes some time to kind of build up, to kind of escalate. Like with a verbal altercation, you hear profanity, there's just a certain cadence. Like as a teachers, we can hear that. We know, okay, something's not right. Let me go see, check out what's going on. So I just wonder, like, how much of it did they witness? And then again, that I'm wondering, okay, was this very, very brief? I mean, we know for a fact the young man, Carmelo, did bring, the other fact is he brought a knife. He brought a knife to a school activity. Now, as a principal, Carmelo's 17 years old. I know that he knew that that was a wrong thing to do. I know that. I believe that 1,000% in my heart. He knows that's just woo. That's like of all the wrong things you could do. Like that's just bad. Bringing a weapon to school. Everybody knows that. Everybody understands that. So the question is like, why? Why did he bring the weapon to school? And you know what? It's going to take some time before we even get an answer to that question. But I really want to know why he felt the need to bring a weapon to this school related activity. All students know that that's you don't do that. All students they understand that you can still be disciplined even if you don't attend that school. If you cause a problem, you make a poor decision, you can still be disciplined. So there's a reason he was carrying around this knife. So this is just sad, but as just going through this, I feel like I feel like this is just based off of the amount of evidence that they have, based off of just based off of the amount of witnesses, based off of how this is in such a public place. I feel like they can kind of piece this together and give us an idea of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So it says here, and again, see, this is what I was looking for right here. I believe there were a ton of students under that tent. Because as I said before, remember, these tents, they're designed to protect the athletes from the elements while they're waiting for the next meet. Here we go. They were with coaches on the field, and it was pouring down rain. We made the decision to relocate to a locker room just to the east to get out of the rain. Once in there, things calmed down a bit. However, they were still hysterical and could not really talk. And there I learned Hunter was the brother of the victim. That's the twin brother. So here we see it's raining, okay? And so yeah, there were a ton of students under that tent. And so we know, I believe, and I don't think it's mentioned in this report, that it started with Austin telling Carmelo, you're in the wrong tent, or get out of this tent. But so that's and that's how it started. I think that's largely been reported. I don't think it's in this police report, but it is good to know. It's good to know that it was raining, so there were a ton of people, I believe, underneath this tent. And I don't think, in my, just what I've seen is, yeah, students, they're just walking around, and sometimes you do have non-athletes find themselves under the tent. There's just so much going on Students walk on and off the track as a track meet, as a race is taking place. It's just there's just so much happening. So it's so that's what we have there. And I just, like, as the the investigator, of as a principal investigating, okay, someone in here's got a vape pen, I'm gonna get to the bottom of it. Or just high school things like that. Definitely not dealing with anything life or death, but I did investigations. And when I did investigations, I really wanted to have as much information as possible so that I could confidently say, okay, here's the conclusion that I've come to, and it's based off of all of this evidence. And so I feel confident about that. Now, and I think that you have a similar situation with this case here. It's just that there was a ton of people under that tent. There was a ton of people under that tent. And so here you go. This is shortly after, Hunter is, he's distraught. They bring him in the locker room. There, this coach learns that he just watched his twin brother die. Says, I attempted to ask them both what happened. I could not really get anything out of Hunter, but witness stated he wanted to speak. I asked him what happened, and he stated they were all sitting on the bleachers. Then said Austin, the victim, told this male that since he did not go to memorial, he had to leave the tent. All right. Karmelo had said during this time of arguing. So there you go. So this is, so there's this is because the student, Karmelo, didn't go to that school. And so, but he decided to, speculating, take shelter from the rain underneath that tent. And so there's a lot that happened. Austin and the male went back and forth. There's a lot that happened here. A lot that was said between here. They went back and forth. We have a verbal altercation. Verbal altercation happening here. And I'm just wondering because there was a couple of coaches who witnessed the incident. But like, this just doesn't, like, there's a lot here. You don't go to memorial, you got to leave. Austin and Karmelo went back and forth. There's a lot there. There's profanity, name calling, things like that. And then Austin stood up. Austin is a victim, and pushed the male to get him out of the tent. Again, these are facts. This is what's reported by one of the witnesses. Karmelo had said during this time of arguing, the male was reaching around in his bag he had. It was at this time the male, Karmelo, took out a knife and stabbed Austin and then left the scene. Let me read that again. Austin stood up, pushed him to get him out of the tent. Karmelo had said during this time of arguing, the male was reaching around in his bag. It was at this time he took out a knife and stabbed Austin. This was all, remember, when he talked to me. After this, I stood by the three athlete witnesses until someone else arrived. Was then relieved by an SRO and went back to patrol. All right. So, and this is a police officer. Excuse me. So this is a police officer getting this information from the well, the brother Austin, the brother Hunter didn't speak, but there was another student with him talking to this police officer, and that was what they were able to gather. Now, again, there's more here, but I trust that with between this witness and the other witnesses, they're going to easily be able to put together what happened underneath this tent, because yeah, I imagine it was probably raining. They were huddled up underneath the tent. So, but I imagine there was some time that went on. There was some going back and forth per. Yeah, there's probably some going back and forth between these two phones out, because unfortunately that's what students do during those times. If they see a verbal altercation, they take time to record the incident because they think something interesting is about to happen. I do believe that I think someone has cell phone footage of this incident. I really, really do. And I think that just, and again, this is me speculating, after, serving as a principal. I think they have quite a bit of information, and that's what leads them to this right here, first degree felony murder. I believe that's how they arrived at that, because when we did investigations, we did the investigation, did the due diligence. We're talking to people, gathering evidence, looking at camera footage, and then we huddle together as assistant principals. We huddle together and say, here's what I got. Here's kind of what the evidence is telling me in terms of a charge for this student. And then us as a team, we would say, yeah, I think that's good there. Or then you may have some dissent and say, yeah, well, what about this? You may want to think about this. So then we would come to a conclusion, and we would talk about the number of days a student's going to be out, or what the appropriate consequence is, and then we would go from there towards writing up. And if it was a big deal, if the student was going to be suspended for more than 10 days, we had to put together a nice typed up report, and we had to, in our minds, we had to imagine that this report is going to be read by the Board of Education. And so on that front page, it had, this is the charge. This is the charge for this student. So there is no, there's a certain order to this. Like, this does not come before you do all of this. You go through all of this stuff. You go through these things. You go through all of this information, talk to your witnesses, and then you come up with the charge. So this is interesting. This is about them preserving the scene. Sergeant Otis walked up to the visitors' bleachers and observed the victim being treated by Frisco Fire Department personnel and also the athletic trainers. The weather began to turn, and it began to heavily downpour at this time. So, okay, so there I was incorrect. So now the weather began to turn. So there weren't a ton of people possibly under that tent. So there you go. There you go. I'm uncertain. Now I'm uncertain, but I believe that there were quite a few people. I believe that there were quite a few people under that tent, maybe in anticipation of some weather. Because what happens a lot of times is students, they just like to congregate underneath that tent. But that is interesting. That is interesting. But at this time, staff moved to the memorial tent to cover the victim and the FFD personnel. Sergeant Otis began using city issued phone to snap crime scene photos to preserve much of the scene as possible due to the weather and large gathering of people that were involved in the incident. Other officers began to set up crime scene tape, moving non-essential personnel out of the area. The officers were informed that the knife that was used, to get to this, was tossed and was still believed to be somewhere close. Eventually, one of the witnesses said they remember seeing it on the bleachers still. Officer Showles was able to locate the knife. It was located between rows 9 and 10 near seat 30. The rain began to come down again heavily, and it was determined that instead of moving the knife, the officers would cover it with a large blue tarp. So there was a lot going on there. Very quickly, and that happens as well, where you've got to start the investigation very quickly. You've got to corral people, like who was there, because not all of these students go to the school. Now, here's some of the other information that was reported. And this is Officer Wetzel. He says, while I was walking towards the visitors' bleachers, I was approached by a witness who identified himself as, began telling me what happened, and I asked him where the stabbing occurred. Advised it happened under the Memorial High School pop-up tent in the visitors' bleachers. I immediately informed Otis where the witness stated the stabbing occurred and gave him the crime scene tape to start securing the crime scene. I then had this witness move to the walkway under the visitors' bleachers out of the rain to further speak with me. Following the summary of my contact with this witness, advised he was sitting under the Memorial High School pop-up tent and was near the victim. Now, before we go on, I think now I'm just getting a picture of this, because usually when I see these tents, they're in the kind of like the infield on the football field area. It's interesting. This is in the bleachers. This is in the bleachers that they've popped up this tent. So I've not seen that, or I don't remember seeing that. Usually it's like a large grass area where students like to just lay down or whatnot. All right. Austin and the suspect, who was later identified as Karmelo Anthony, and he was from Centennial High School, and was sitting under the Memorial High School tent. Now, as a principal, like, is he hurting anything? Like, what's the harm? Like, as principals, like, if you bring to us different disagreements and things to settle, like, this is like what, is he hurting anyone? Come on. Now, again, I know that there's school personnel out there who would say, no, you shouldn't, that's not the way we do things. We don't like that. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. I understand that. But in the grand scheme of things, it's about the rain. Is he hurting anything? And I don't know. I don't know what happened. I was not there. Austin had told Anthony that he needed to move out from under the team's tent. And Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, and reached inside and proceeded to tell Austin. Now, see, here's that other part that we're missing, but you only get the rest of it after you talk to a number of people, and then you can put together what happened. This is what I've kind of heard. Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, and reached inside and proceeded to tell Austin, touch me and see what happens. Now, see, it's interesting, and I'm sure that as officers go back and talk to this person again, as he says, he was told that he needed to move out from under the team's tent, told that he needed to move out from the team's tent, and then Anthony grabbed his bag. Well, the way the other witness described it, it sounded like, okay, we got a verbal altercation. We're going back and forth. So, but again, we weren't there. We were not, I was not there. So I don't know. But I can only speculate based off of my experience that these two had a verbal altercation. It wasn't, hey, you need to leave. Then the student opens his bag. No, I think there's a little bit more going on here. Touch me and see what happens. No one really thought Anthony really had any weapons in his bag, because all students know that's a no-no. You don't do that. You do not bring a weapon to a campus. You don't do that. Everyone knows that. These students, they're junior, around the age of junior, they know better than that. Junior, senior age, they know better than that. Austin proceeded to touch. I'd like to know what that looks like, to touch Anthony. We do know that another student said that he pushed him. Touch Anthony. And then Anthony told Austin to punch him and see what happens. So this is like, oh gosh. You just like, and I know what, I can imagine that a lot of people who are not teachers, who don't work in schools, who are not coaches, I'm sure they're wondering, like, where are the adults? And that's, when you look back on things like this and you look at the results, yeah, I think it's natural to wonder about that. And, yeah, I'm wondering too, because it said in the report that there were adults who witnessed it. So it's like, ugh. So, touch me and see what happens, says Karmelo. No one really thought he had a weapon in his bag. Austin proceeded to touch Anthony, and then, so it sounds like he's just, you step over this line and see what happens. Yeah, Austin steps over the line, and then Anthony told Austin to punch him and see what happens. And it's just like, a short time later, Austin grabbed Anthony to tell him to move, and Anthony pulled out what recalled as a black knife and stabbed Austin once in the chest and then ran away. Austin began grabbing his chest and telling everyone to get help. So, gosh, it's just so tragic. So we've gone through a lot of the facts of this case, and there's missing information. There's like video footage from the security cameras, and then I definitely believe that some students recorded this. I believe that happened. And then you have a ton of witnesses, and then you have student witnesses, and then you have these adults as well who were in the area and they witnessed part of it. Perhaps it was just, I don't know, perhaps they witnessed the end of it. Gosh. What's going through my mind is there's just a certain cadence. Like, there's a sound of students playing, having fun, laughter, what have you. And then there's this certain sound of, okay, that sounds like a fight. That sounds like trouble. And it's just, gosh, with these track meets, there's just so much going on. And I can imagine that after this, there's going to be some rules in place. Because I just, schools, they're districts, they're just averse to risk. They don't want any risk. They don't want to take any risk. So I can imagine at the very least, They're going to have strict rules about, where students can be during these track meets. I can imagine that rule change is coming, but yeah, it's just sad all around. Sad all around. At the end of it, it does look like they have a ton of information, a ton of evidence, but no one's going to be happy. Have a family, some parents who had to bury their child. That should never happen. And then you have the family of Karmelo Anthony, and Karmelo Anthony himself. His life will never ever be the same after this. So just want Karmelo to get a fair trial with a good defense, and uh, that's tough. Well, that's it. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share with you and dive into the facts with you on this video, just to go through it. There's just so much speculation, and a lot of people have just made up their minds what they want to believe, and that's fine. But then you also have the facts, and that's typically the system is based on facts, and that's how decisions are made. Ideally, that's the way it should go. But yeah, so there's that. Guess we'll continue to follow these facts, follow the case as they make decisions, prayerfully based on the facts. So for now, we'll just leave it right there. Thank you so much for sticking with me in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.